I never knew who my dad was. He left me and my mother even before I was born. I was separated from my mother at an early age and only had vague memories of her. I was afterwards raised by my grandmother until we too were separated. I was eventually sent to live with Hug, a ship carpenter, in Baltimore, Maryland. Hug's wife, Sophie, began to teach me the alphabet. It was against the law in Maryland to teach a slave to read, but Sophie thought it was important to teach me. Hug, on the other hand, was very much against teaching me to read, believing that if a slave was taught to read and think that it would prompt him to desire his freedom. He then admonished her not to teach me any further. I was hired out to William Freeland and spent time among Freeland slaves. I decided that I would help the other slaves learn as had I, and I began teaching them to read the Bible at a weekly Sunday school service. Much like me, the other slaves became enamored with learning. Weeks later, neighboring plantation owners learned what I was doing and threatened to beat all the slaves attending the next Sunday school meeting. Thomas, Hug's brother, had been my real owner, and he sent me off to work for a farmer named Edward Covey. Covey was well known with a reputation for beating slaves and breaking their wills. Thomas must have wanted to break my spirit, so Covey beat me up frequently. While the brutal whippings took their toll on me psychologically, I was a strong young man and eventually fought back against Covey, after which the beatings ceased. I began a relationship with Anna Murray, who was from Baltimore, Maryland. She was a free woman of color, and she was 5 years older than me. The thought of being a slave married to a free woman was too much for me, so I decided to try another escape attempt after the two first ones failed. As soon as I got to New York, I sent for Anna, and she joined me there, where we got married on September 15th, 1838, less than 2 weeks after my escape. We initially took the name Johnson, but adopted the last name Douglas after we moved to New Bedford, which had a thriving, free black community. We eventually had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. There, I became a licensed minister in 1839. This began my times as a public speaker in 1840. I gave a speech in Elmira, New York, one of the stops of the Underground Railroad. In 1845, I decided to publish my autobiography in order to give an account of my years in slavery to a wider audience. The book was entitled Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. The book became a bestseller, although critics and skeptics insisted that it must have been ghostwritten, arguing that a black person could not have written so eloquently. Around 1859, I was approached by John Brown. Brown devised the plan to raid the Federal Armory in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and to distribute the weapons to slaves across the country. His plan to overthrow the slaves South was too risky for me, who believed the attack on the federal property would turn them against us. The raid was unsuccessful. My safety might be at risk, so I fled to Canada. A year later, while traveling in England, I was informed that my youngest daughter, Annie, had passed away in Rochester. I traveled back to attend her services. Upon the beginning of the American Civil War, I advocated on behalf of the blacks wanting to fight in a war for their freedom. I spoke publicly and through print on this issue and was invited by the President Abraham Lincoln to sit down and discuss the matter. It could be argued that having the ear of the President made me the most powerful black man in the country. I talked to Lincoln about the role and the treatment of the black soldier, and later spoke with Andrew Johnson about black voting rights. In 1872, my reputation even led me to be nominated for the position of vice president on the Equal Rights Party ticket alongside of Victoria Woodhull. Unfortunately, later that year, my house in Rochester was burned to the ground with arson suspected. I had to leave New York and move down to Washington, D.C., but I never stopped going around the country speaking out in favor of the rights of free blacks and for the rights of women. I continued my public speaking and traveled across the United States and overseas in 1888 at the Republican National Convention. A vote was cast for me to be nominee for the presidency of the United States. A year later, I was appointed the Minister, Resident, and Consul General by the Republic of Haiti, and a few years later, I built rental properties for black in Baltimore called Douglas Place. The buildings still stand to this day and have been listed on the National Register of Historical Places. After attending a meeting for the National Council of Women in Washington, D.C., Frederick Douglass died at his home in 1895. The cause of death was believed to have been either a massive heart attack or a stroke. He was buried at Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, New York, next to Anna. His second wife, Helen, would be buried beside him years later. Frederick Douglass was more than just an abolitionist speaker. He took the plight of slaves on his back and championed their freedom to the world, disregarded his personal safety and liberty. In a time when blacks had almost no voice, he had the ear of the masses.